Hey everybody, I hope you're well. I'm making this live stream to help sort out some complications, it would seem, regarding the whole issue regarding the Oakland Athletics' possible move to Las Vegas, and then of course Howard Terminal. And it it seems to have gotten a little complicated with muddled media messages and uh, noise happening in the middle of a election year, which is what this is for Steve Sisolak. He's fighting for his life. I think he'll be reelected, however, as governor of Nevada. But when you are in situations like that, funny things tend to happen regarding messaging. Okay. And what happened was started with the New York Post. And the New York Post reported, I didn't do this on StreamYard, otherwise I'd have the side thing, but I don't have the time for that right now. The New York Post reported that Governor Sisolak had said he was against using public subsidies for the athletics move, which basically would kill the move, because given the economics of a stadium, particularly a baseball stadium, you can't really get it to pencil without some level of public involvement. It's just, to say it's difficult is putting it mildly. So you need it. It has to happen. Also, I happen to think that, and I'm on the record as saying this, and I'll say it again, public investment in large-scale facilities that are used for sports is a great thing for a host of reasons. It helps tourism. It helps tourism-related jobs. It helps marshal and circulate dollars through the community, and go on and on and on. It also allows the government a certain degree of control over who gets what jobs, over minority hiring, over union wages. You get the idea. It's kind of hard to have that kind of influence without some skin in the game. And government should have that, some level of skin in the game. There's nothing wrong with that. Private sector paying for its own large-scale facilities hasn't necessarily benefited the economy. All right, it hasn't really benefited the public sector, or you or me, because it tends to result in higher base ticket prices. Don't talk to me about the Raiders, because that's the market talking, not the base. But the bottom line is, when you have public money involved in a deal, the ticket prices can be lower. That's just a fact. So anyway, the New York Post basically put out that, according to its unnamed sources, and yeah, that happens, okay? Steve Sisolak did not want to put public money in, but when you read the New York Post article, it gets more nuanced than the headline would have you believe. The headline would have you believe, hey, as I did, hey, you know, he's just completely opposed to it, okay? But not really. Then Mitch Akers came out, who writes for the Review Journal, and said, no, wait a minute, this is on Friday. No, wait a minute. Sisolak says he's not against the stadium or any kind of level of subsidy. Well, the problem with what Mitch put out is that it was behind a paywall. And so you had content after content after content, and then Mitch's version that appeared like 5 down in a search for Steve Sisolak Oakland on Twitter, okay? It didn't get much play at all, and still hasn't. And then it didn't help his case that Governor Sisolak didn't use his own Twitter account to absolutely unequivocally say, hey, you know what? Those reports you heard about, what you read in the New York Post, just simply isn't true. All right? So the question is, and still the unanswered question is, where did that come from that the New York Post would put that out there by a source it deems reliable? It's a good question. And here's what I think happened, okay? I think what happened was someone who had unusual access to negotiations and discussions either heard that in the room or on a Zoom call. When I say in the room, this day and age, it's a Zoom call, and thought they would actually kind of throw a monkey wrench into things by putting it out there as a kind of a trial balloon to see if the governor really stick to what he probably said in a behind closed door session over some level of funding that was proposed. That's what I think happened. I mean, it didn't just, I hope for New York Post's sake, it didn't just drop from one of their reporters' imagination and then they decided they would play a game. There are people who do that, okay? But I'm certain, just by what I choose to believe, having worked with New York Post editors before, that's not something they would do. The New York Post would not run that if the source wasn't good enough for them to be comfortable putting that out there saying, hey, it's unnamed. Because New York Post just didn't make a field day of adding to the content regarding the Athletics and then Las Vegas and Howard Terminal and everything else, right? It comes from an unusual source. It's not any of the usual suspects. And it's not me, or anybody else. It's New York Post. And so I haven't seen where the New York Post has come out and said, hey, you know what? We're wrong. In fact, for grins, I'm typing NY Post Sisolak in Twitter, and I'm not seeing any pushback. And I contacted Governor Sisolak's office myself for a statement. I haven't gotten anything back from them yet at this point, okay? But this is all over the place, and all over the place by the New York Post. And then Mitch Akers wrote on Twitter that Major League Baseball Commissioner Rob Manfred told him regarding the New York Post story that Sisolak would block potential A's move tied to no public money. He said that would not be accurate. I spoke to the governor only once, and it was some time ago, okay? Now here's another nuance. Mitch Akers didn't go to Steve Sisolak, okay? Mitch Akers went to the commissioner of Major League Baseball. That was on the 8th of April. So now there's a gentleman by the name of Brett Forrest I've never heard of, who is a Las Vegas reporter with Great News 3 Las Vegas. And he writes on Governor Sisolak. He wrote what Governor Sisolak sent to him in terms of a statement. So here's a statement that I would have liked to have gotten. Governor Sisolak knows the great economic opportunity offered to Nevada by bringing in more professional sports franchises. And there's no better city than Las Vegas for sporting events, as evidenced by the great success of the Vegas Golden Knights, the Las Vegas Raiders, and the recent announcement regarding the Formula One Las Vegas Grand Prix. The governor has been clear from the start that he would not consider a room tax package for this potential move, and that has not been an issue in his conversations with the commissioner or the athletics leadership. The governor and his team will continue to pursue bringing business opportunities to Nevada to further cement our status as the sports and entertainment capital of the world. So there you go. They don't want to use room tax. And I've talked about this before on my program, that I said I couldn't see the governor going for that, considering the machinations that went into the 88 100ths and 1% room tax that feeds the debt associated with the $645 million bond issue that was let in accordance with Senate Bill 1, which was passed on the 14th of October of 2016. So during that bond issue was originally supposed to have a rate of 1%. If you take a look at the consultant estimates, that got reduced. I have a trail of the documents, and I've blogged about this and blogged about this extensively if you follow this over the years with me, going back to 2016. That went from 1% to 0.7% until it wound up at 88 100ths of 1%. You would say, why the adjustment? Because they realized, what I had blogged early on, is that 0.7% is not going to give them enough money to pay off that debt service, even with a debt coverage ratio of 1.5 to 1, which is what they were looking at and used. Normally it's 2. But the reason why they use a debt coverage ratio of 1.5 to 1 was because it gave them more room. They knew they weren't going to get a lot of money with that low rate, so they were trying to, in a sense, jump the fiscal shark, right? By saying, okay, we know we're not going to get 2 times the debt, so if we just move the goalposts closer so that we can make the kick. That's what they were doing. They're moving the goalposts closer, because normally a bond issue of that type has a debt coverage ratio of 2 to 1, not 1.5 to 1. That was the key. I said it back then. That's the case now. Okay. So, but you would say, okay, how does that explain? That's one thing, but what else would drive them to consider a rate so low that they may not be able to pay off their own bond? Casinos. The casinos were very concerned that they would have to pass on that monies to their patrons, and it would result in higher average daily room rates, and that they would lose out to their competitors in cities like San Francisco and Chicago, not to mention Honolulu. That was the fear. So you think that with all that fear, they're going to go back and dip into that trough again for an organization in the storied athletics in a league that, while popular, doesn't quite move the needle like the National Football League does. It does, but I would say baseball is maybe at 1/12 the power of the NFL in terms of overall civic impact, in terms of it being a market unto itself. All right. So anyway, the room tax, the idea that it would be a room tax is media driven by people who don't understand that there are different ways to handle this problem. For example, people who are true students of the deal would remember that the original SB 1 included a provision for tax increment financing. In fact, it was the original proposal such that it would have created the most powerful stadium authority ever created, ever developed, ever approved. Why? Because the authority board would have had a 25-mile radius of land it could pick from to then acquire and then use those properties in combination to raise money via tax increment financing. If you read the legislation, I wrote about this, that's what it laid out. I said, holy cow. They can still do that. Tax increment financing is the one tool that, for reasons best known to the miners, hasn't been used effectively. And when the consultants, I'm not going to get into their names, put together the study of tax increment financing. As I said to them back then, and I'm saying now, it wasn't about tax increment financing. They slammed together any source of public revenue, called the tax increment financing, didn't present how the tax increment financing formula worked, and then did their quote analysis. It was sloppy, folks. It didn't help the body of knowledge. It just didn't. Anyway, so now they say the deal's still on, but I'm waiting for Sisolak himself to come up and say something positive in public about the deal. But the governor's office would say, wait a minute, you're going to disrespect us like that? No, I'm not. What they're basically saying is, hey, look, we're all for this. We just don't want a room tax. That's what they're saying. There are a lot of ways to get it done without a room tax. A lot. I'll be back with more on this. Subscribe to Zenny60. Oh, and by the way, I said Howard Terminal too. Howard Terminal news has been largely dark. If you think that the tide is turning toward Las Vegas, and the news is that the Major League Baseball has already said this is something they want to do, you just wait until the architectural renderings come out in May. All right? I've got more to say about this. I'm going to focus on how Dave Cavall has handled this locally. And subscribe to Zenny62 and bookmark oaklandnewsnow.com. That ends this broadcast.